everybody. I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. This week, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to naturalist, explorer, presenter, and writer Steve Backshall. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. Hey Steve, how are you?
Hello, how are you doing? It's so great to talk to you.
Oh my gosh, it's so good to have you on the podcast. I'm good, thanks. Are you all right?
I am, yes. I'm in the midst of a very busy period of work, plus also looking after my kids full time as well, because my wife, Helen, is preparing for the Paris Olympics. So I'm both full-time daddy and full-time breadwinner, which is taking its toll.
Oh my God, yeah, that does sound chaotic. I mean, is all that going well?
It does seem to be, yeah. She's training incredibly hard. She's doing really well. She's a rower and a two-time Olympic gold medalist already. So this will be her fourth Olympics, which is a pretty extraordinary thing. And we're going to be able to take the kids along to cheer on Mummy, which is going to be incredible.
Oh, that is so impressive and like so great that the kids are going to be able to share that experience with you guys as well. I think that'll be something that they'll always remember.
Exactly.
So have you got anything nice planned for today?
Today, yes, I'm actually going out to my favourite building in the world, which is the Oxford Museum of Natural History, a part of the University of Oxford. It is a occasionally chaotic but utterly beautiful Gothic building that's just filled with curiosities from around the world, including one of the, if not the best collections of British insects found anywhere in the world. And I love it there.
Oh, wow, that sounds really cool. So to begin with then, can you please tell me about where your love of nature and animals sort of began?
Well, I can't really remember because, as far as I'm concerned, my love of wildlife is innate. It's something that's in me. And I really strongly believe that it's in all of us. And it kind of makes sense that it would be. But we get it knocked out of us over time if we are not led in the right directions. So my parents tell tales of me going through the compost heap looking for grass snake eggs and, going out looking for birds' nests when I was barely old enough to walk. And I see the same impulses in my kids. And it's whether those kind of natural, innate impulses to have a fascination with nature are fostered or if they're left to wither.
Yeah, okay, I totally get that. I mean, do you think that it's important for kids to develop a love of nature at a young age?
I look around and I see so many issues for young people now. I think childhood is so much more complicated and so much more difficult than it was for me 40 plus years ago. But an awful lot of those complexities can be solved with the simplicity of nature. And, our burgeoning obesity crisis can be solved with the outdoors and with adventure and with, all of the physical things that we get from the outdoors. But so many of the ills that we suffer from in our heads as well can be at very least eased by nature. It's something which has brought me so much joy over the years, and I know it does for so many people. So yes, I think it's incredibly important. And I also get to experience all over again the joy of going pond dipping with my kids, climbing trees with them, and seeing those things that were so important to me as a kid again afresh through them.
Oh yeah, I mean that must be so cool to get to like almost re-experience that and watch them develop the same love of nature that you had when you were a kid and still do.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many things about nature that take me straight back to my childhood. And one of those is something that I'm so excited to talk to you about because it's sound. And I think that the richness of sound in the natural world is something which is not only incredibly beautiful, but it adds a whole other layer to our experience of the natural world. And also in me, takes me straight back to childhood. So the number one noise that does that, I would say, is the simple song of the blackbird. So I've got two songs here that I want to play to you. The first of which is the chink, chink, chink alarm call of the blackbird, and it sounds like this. Okay, so if you hear that sound, then that is a blackbird letting all the other blackbirds and all the other birds around know that there is something there that could be a threat. It could be the next door neighbor's cat. It could be a sparrowhawk circling overhead. It is a sign that that bird is letting everyone else know, take care. There's something around that could be dangerous. And alarm calls are really intriguing. You know, I've used them from monkeys and deer to track tigers in India. I've used them to underwater to look for the presence of barracuda and sharks because the fish are alarm calling. It's one of the most exciting of all noises, and it's one that happens right in our backyards. But the other sound, the more famous one that comes from blackbirds, is their song. Now, there are many different kinds. There is a sub song, which is a kind of half hearted song. They even have a mourning song when they may have lost their youngsters. But a blackbird in full song is something really special. It sounds like this.
Oh wow. I mean, the two sound so different, don't they? It's mad to think that the blackbird can sort of create those two different sounds that are both so unique and different to each other.
Yeah. How does it sound to you, that call, that song?
It's really sweet, and I think I kind of recognize it from like maybe being sat in the garden and hearing something similar.
Yeah, so the Blackbird's song is hugely evocative. It's talked of as being fluted, as this really rich kind of burbling mixture of notes, which is usually used as an advertisement. It's one bird calling out to try and attract a partner, and this will happen kind of late winter through into the spring, into early summer. It's the sound of a mature woodland here in the UK or the sound of your back garden. And the thing about the Blackbird song that's so special to me is the second I hear it, I just get transported back to my childhood. I used to have a blackbird that would sit outside my bedroom window and wake me up every single morning with that song. And it's so nostalgic. Hearing the song of the blackbird is to me something that whisks me back faster than anything else other than maybe smell, because sense of smell is supposedly most closely linked to our olfactory, to our sense of memory. Um, it just takes me there straight away, takes me back to being 6, 7 years old and waking up with a blackbird calling outside my bedroom window.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And I believe that you also grew up around rescue animals. So could you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up on a small holding, which was full of animals that were the kind of waifs and strays from the local area. So we had a donkey. I can't actually remember where we got the donkey from, but he had a kind of quite pronounced asthma, so he could never get all the way through a bray. He'd sort of start off with oh, and that again is a sound that takes me straight back to being in that small holding as a kid. Every morning I'd get up and I would milk the goats before going to school. Usually end up with the milk getting kicked all over me and going in stinking of rancid goat milk. We had peacocks, guinea fowl, and all these other animals, almost all of which were rescues. So they were animals that other people didn't want that would end up getting dumped on us. And they were most of them a little bit damaged. And all the more precious to us because of that. We had, a whole bunch of ducks and chickens. They were rubbish at laying eggs, but we knew each and every one of them by name, and they were more like friends than they were, domestic animals.
Oh, wow. I mean, that sounds amazing. Now, you've traveled a lot over the years and obviously met lots of different people, but has there been anyone you've met who's particularly inspired you?
I think probably my parents more than anything else. I'm very lucky in that my mum and dad, they didn't have a huge amount of cash. They didn't have a great deal of schooling, but they were very adventurous souls. Still are now. I mean, they're out traveling around India now, and they're in their 80s. They were people who wanted to get the very most out of life and get the very most out of life for my family as well, for me and my sister. And that's why they took on this kind of ramshackle, falling apart small holding and gave us this incredible childhood surrounded by nature, which has been so important to who I am now. And a lot of that is very much what I'm hoping to do with my youngsters. I'm hoping that they get to embrace the natural world as well. And we're lucky in that we live on the river. And that kind of leads me on to my next call, because there's a bird here that most people who are around the river all the time have probably never seen, and yet they're here. They're just very, very difficult to spot. And the one thing, the trigger that allows people to experience their first kingfisher, surely the most beautiful of all river birds, is their sound. It's relatively simple. It's not particularly tuneful. It's certainly not like the beautiful fluted call of the blackbird, but it goes like this.
Oh, I mean, that's really sweet. Like you said, it's kind of simple, but it does sound really sweet.
Well, the thing that's important about it is not really the sound itself, but what it signifies. So hearing that sound is the one thing that can lead you to know that a kingfisher is nearby, because despite the fact that they are incredibly bright in color, they have these iridescent blue and green, orange feathers. They're very small. They tend to kind of blend into the background despite all those colors. And actually, unless you listen for them, unless you tune in to their world and that simple monotone cheep, which is actually, when you get to know it, distinctly different from that of a coot or a moorhen, for example, there's a kingfisher around. And that is one of the great wildlife sightings of the riverbank. The other that we have around here that we're incredibly lucky to experience is from an incredible bird of prey. Our most conspicuous here, it's the red kite.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's really sort of unique and distinctive, isn't it?
Is that one that you've heard before?
I don't think so.
It has this curious, it's almost, I think, like a shepherd whistling for his dogs. It's that really kind of high pitched twirling whistling call. And the second you hear that, you know that circling over your head is one of the most impressive birds of prey found in the whole nation, which is increasing in its numbers because it is one of the great conservation success stories, particularly here in England, but in Wales as well. So they were extinct here in England. They were reintroduced in the Chiltern Hills, which is where I live right now, and they're starting to expand out across the whole country. And all of a sudden, this glorious bird of prey with a sort of a slaty grey head, a bright red feathers, and a classic circling flight with an arrow-like tail. When you hear that call, you not only know that there's an incredible predator circling over your head, but it gives you the idea that conservation can work, that our natural environments can bounce back given a chance, that with human effort and input, we can give wild animals another chance. So to me, it's the sound of hope. And I get to listen to that in my back garden. And I've now got to the stage where, my youngsters will hear that sound and they'll shout out, red kite, daddy. And it's one of those ways that I think tuning in to the sounds of the natural world can enhance your experience of being outside. All of a sudden, you're just walking to school, walking to the shops, and the sounds you hear can let you know that there's a predator nearby, or let you know that there's nesting birds, or let you know that there is something around you that might be quite rare that you don't usually see. And almost always, it's down to listening first. It's down to your this sense that so often we just don't use enough.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree with you. I mean, for me, because I have no sight whatsoever and never have, because I was born blind, sound is literally my way of experiencing stuff. The things I hear are basically the things I see, if that makes any sense. The way I see the world is all through the things I hear.
Well, in that case, can I give you a little treat? That there's one song which we sadly don't get to hear very often here in England anymore, but it is probably the best known, most eulogized, most talked about bird song of all. It's one that I was very lucky. Very shortly after I met my now wife, Helen, I heard this bird, the nightingale, singing just up the river from where I live. And I ran back to the house and I said, Hels, quick, you come with me. You've got to hear this. And I jumped in the canoe with her, paddled her upstream. And luckily it was still there. It was still singing. And I looked at her face, and I think if she had been disappointed, that probably would have been our relationship over and done with right then. But she wasn't. She was as excited as I was, and that's been a big part of our relationship going forward. Because to me, there are very few things as beautiful as the song of the nightingale.
I mean, that is so sweet. I totally get why you guys both love that, because it's such a sweet sound, and like you said, really, really beautiful.
It's one that has inspired romantic poets to write odes. It's one that's inspired people to write music. It's been, transcribed on records and audio recordings and gone all the way around the world. It's something that can bring incredible joy, but there's also in it, I think, notes of melancholy as well. And it's one that I think, depending on your mood, can make you feel more happy or more sad and melancholy, just depending on where you're at any given time. And I think that nature has that ability to enhance your emotions, to enhance the way you're feeling. And it's done that for me so often over the years. And I still do find, even now, if I'm feeling a bit blue, feeling a bit challenged, that I know that going outside, going and go for a wander, going down the local park, going up into the hill and just listening to these sounds, it is gonna give me just that little bit of positivity that I need.
Yeah, definitely. I totally get that. Now, if you had to pick, what would you say has been your favorite expedition that you've been on and been a part of?
That's so difficult. I've been on, I don't know, maybe 40 world first expeditions. First ascents of mountains, first descents of whitewater rivers, first ever exploration of jungle rivers that no one's been down before. And every single one of them in that moment feels like the most special. And it's very, very difficult to pick any one. There are some that are particularly special because of the time of my life that they happened at. So around about the birth of my first child, Logan, I made a first ascent of a mountain in Greenland, way up in the Arctic Circle. And it had never been climbed before, but it also didn't have a name. So we applied to the local people and asked if they would allow us to name this mountain. And I named it in the local tongue, which I'm not going to try and pronounce because it has about 40 syllables in it. But I named the mountain Firstborn Son. And that to me will always be very, very precious. And I kind of hope that someday I'll get the chance to take Logan there and take him to the mountain that bears his name.
Oh, that is amazing. Does Logan kind of know that that mountain's almost named after him?
He does. There's also actually, I'm in a bit of trouble because there is a waterfall, a dry waterfall at a pool in a canyon in the deserts of the Middle East, which is actually named Logan's Pool, because I think he was about one at the time, but the twins still hadn't been born. So I've got twins who are just a little bit younger than Logan, and I haven't had the chance to name anything after them yet. So by the time they get to their teens, they're going to be looking at me like, "Oi, Dad, where's my waterfall? Where's my mountain?" So I better get doing more expeditions and get a chance to put some more names down.
Yeah, you're gonna have to find something to name after them because I can imagine that when they're all grown up, Logan's gonna be like, I've got a mountain, I've got a waterfall, and the twins are just gonna be like, we've got nothing. So yeah, I think you're gonna have to find something to name after them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not planning on giving up on expeditions anytime soon. So here's hoping. Watch this space.
Yeah, definitely. So sort of leading on from that then, what would you say was the most challenging expedition that you've been on?
They all are challenging for different reasons. You know, there are expeditions that are challenging because I'm away from the family for long periods of time. There are expeditions that are physically demanding, expeditions where you may go without food for long periods of time. One of those was when I did my mountaineering qualification with the Indian Army back in 2005, in the Indian Himalayas, and we spent about 5 weeks up above 5,000 meters, and just really weren't eating enough and doing very, very long days, carrying oil barrels up mountains, and just doing stuff that was grinding us down. And then at the end of it, we made an attempt on a 7,000 meter mountain, and we were just wiped. We were all of us wiped. There was very heavy snowfall that we were breaking our way through. It was nothing like the hardest mountain I've ever done, but because we were all already in such a state of fatigue, it broke me. It just totally broke me, and I got to a point where I couldn't go anymore. And if it hadn't been for the other guys that I was with, helping me carry my bag, stuff like that, I wouldn't have got down. Um, so that's one that will always stick in the memory.
Oh my gosh, that sounds I don't know how you did that. I mean, I don't know how you do any of them, to be fair, because I was doing my research on you and seeing all the things you've done. You're just amazing. Like, I don't know how you do all of these expeditions because they all sound so tough, but I suppose you just kind of get used to it.
Well, a lot of it is driven by new science. It is driven by wanting to find out new things about the animals that we're seeing and about the places we're going to. And actually, quite a lot of that in recent years has been through sound. So we've been doing a lot of programs recently on cetaceans, that is whales and dolphins. And we're getting to a stage where breaking down whale and dolphin communication is giving us an insight into how whales and dolphins have names for each other, for themselves, how they will announce themselves with a name and speak that name to other people as if they're introducing themselves. How different tribes of orca, for example, have completely different languages and different dialects within those languages. And they are very much carrying out conversations. And that obviously is the very first kind of tenet, I guess, of culture, of society. And starting to break these things down and starting to understand that there's other animals around us that are as sentient and as social as we are is to me one of the real drivers. I'd just like to play you a little bit actually of orca sound, because it there's so much about it that we have yet to understand.
Wow, I mean, That is so cool. I've never heard anything like that, but that is really, really cool.
It cuts right through you, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
some of that is going to be communication with other orca. So this is a recording from a group of orca known as Biggs orca. They're from the northwest of the Pacific Ocean and pretty close to Canada and Alaska. And they mostly feed on mammal prey. So they feed on anything from sea otters to seals, sea lions, all the way up to the great whales. And they use these calls to talk to each other to plan their hunting strategies, to plan the way that they're going to work together. And those orca are completely different from other groups of orca that live in their world but will only feed on fish, or some that will only feed on sharks. And one of the ways we're starting to understand how they're different is by using sound and starting to realize that they have completely different languages and they may not even understand each other. So they could be swimming in the same area of ocean, and effectively it's like me going to somewhere where people are only speaking Swahili and I don't understand that. And it could be exactly the same with different pods of orca.
Right. Okay. I mean that's so cool that they sort of all, even though they're the same animal, all have these different ways of communicating that, different types of orca don't understand. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, it is. And there's so much that we have yet to learn. So orca are the largest kind of dolphin. And in many ways, they're like a supersized bottlenose dolphin. They're incredibly intelligent. They have enormous brains, and they work together as a team cooperatively to hunt their prey. They're coming up with new creative methods of finding that prey all the time. And we're getting to a point where we're starting to break down certain areas of dolphin and orca communication to an extent where people are saying, well, using AI in a matter of years, we might be able to understand this. In fact, even we might in the near future be able to learn how to speak orca and dolphin. I mean, how cool would that be?
Okay, yeah, that would be really, really impressive. It's scary to think though, isn't it? That like using AI, which has sort of only really come into play recently over the past couple of years, once that technology is more advanced, you might be able to do those things. It's cool, but then it's also scary to think about, isn't it?
I mean, it's a little bit worrying to think about many different ways that AI will go and knowing what we'll do with it. I mean, what are we going to say if we do figure out how to speak dolphin, how to speak orca? How on earth are we going to communicate to them? What are we going to say to them? I mean, if you had the chance to speak to wild dolphin for the first time, what would you say?
Well, that's a question I've never been asked before. Um, do you know what? I genuinely don't know. What would you want to say to them?
Well, it's kind of corny, but I guess the first thing I want to say would be sorry. There are so many ways that we are affecting the world of the dolphin and particularly of the orca, and they're almost all negative. There's very few ways that we as human beings are affecting their world and making it better. So I guess I'd want to say, listen, just a shout out from the whole human species. We're really sorry.
Yeah, yeah, I think that'd be really valid. I totally get that. And I think, yeah, that would be probably a very good thing to say.
On this topic, I have one last sound that I want to play to you. And I think, first of all, I'm going to play it, and then you have a stab at guessing what you think it might be.
I,
So,
genuinely-
any thoughts? What do you reckon?
I have no idea.
So, that is the sound of a hunting sperm whale, thousands of meters below the surface of the sea. And that is a clang that's being generated by an organ called the monkey lips inside its head. I'm not making it up. That is genuinely what it's called. And it's kind of smacking these monkey lips together, so sort of going, but making it with that incredible, intense, directed sound, which is known as a clang. Only the males make those sounds. And there's lots and lots of different ideas as to what they could be used for. So there's no doubt that they use echolocation sounds as a way of building up a three-dimensional picture of their world. There's no doubt that they have very sophisticated communication, not quite as much as the orca and the dolphins, but it is getting there. They chat to each other, they talk about their day. This sound, the clang, bearing in mind that that is happening miles away from the microphone that's been recording it, there's an idea that this could be being used as a weapon, that sound could be being used in a directed force against things like giant squid, thousands of meters below the surface of the sea, to incapacitate them, to effectively turn them to jelly so that the squid can then, so that the sperm whale can then zip in and eat them. So it's directing these big bangs sounds, these clangs, which sound a bit like someone whacking a spanner on a metal pipe. And it's using that sound to discombobulate their prey.
Oh, wow. I mean, that is so cool that animals are able to do that just by sort of making that sound. I mean, that's amazing. Obviously, you've just showed me some animal calls there, and I know you've had encounters with many wild animals, but is there one encounter you've had that you particularly treasure?
I think that most of the time it is when a wild animal chooses to interact with you, and almost always that is an intelligent mammal. And I've had it many, many times over the years, but the ones that stand out are generally things like the great whales and seals and sea lions. When they take an interest in you and on their terms come and want to interact with you, want to play with you, that's always something really special. I've been lucky enough to have it happen with humpback whales many times, with sperm whales, with dolphins, even with orca. In fact, one of the most precious, I would say, was up in the Arctic fjords of Norway in an Arctic winter when there's very little daylight and the northern lights are crackling across the sky. To have an orca come in to me underwater, circling around and around and around me, looking at me, assessing me in the same way that I am doing to it. And it's a moment that kind of all of a sudden you look in their eye and you can see the intelligence. You can see them figuring you out the same way that you're doing to them. And that's something really special.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. And I would imagine that that experience, that encounter, is something that I think you'll always remember.
Absolutely, yeah. They're the moments that you treasure the most. I mean, most often as a naturalist, you're observing wildlife from a distance. So you're trying to do everything you can to make sure that the animal doesn't sense you're there, so that you're allowing it to behave naturally. Those few moments, and they don't happen often, but when an animal looks at you and thinks, "Oh, that looks interesting. I wonder what that's all about," and comes to you, they're one in a million, and they are just so precious.
Yeah, totally. I can imagine. Now, as well as, being on many expeditions, you somehow found time to write a series of books called the Falcon Chronicles. So, could you tell me a bit about them?
Yes, I can. In fact, I recorded some of those as audiobooks, so they're out there somewhere with my. Well, I mean, gosh, if you want to hear my voice anymore, which I'm pretty sure you must be sick of by now. I know most people are. My family certainly are. I had an idea for a series of kids fiction novels. The first one was called Tiger Wars, and it follows a young pair. They're based initially in India, and they're on the run. They're on the run from a shadowy organization known as the Clan, and it's a kind of cat and mouse tale as they chase across the continent, trying to escape this organization while also getting involved with and solving some of the great conservation crises of our times. I loved writing them. There's sometimes writing fiction where it kind of feels like the story's playing out in your head and you're just recording it and I can barely keep up. My typing's not quite fast enough to keep up with all the ideas that are popping out of my head. But I wrote four of them, and it's probably time for another actually, if I can find the time in between the kids and the Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. And they sound amazing. I would definitely have a listen to the audiobooks. I mean, they sound so cool. But how did you get the idea for that? Was it just something that sort of like popped into your head? Or, how did that come about?
Well, there's lots of different things. So they're filled with a lot of things that are from my own personal experience. They're all set in places that I know well and where I've done expeditions. They involve an awful lot of animals that I've worked with in the past, so I have a decent understanding of. And the tales themselves kind of made themselves up. When I wrote the first book, I had no idea what the second book would be, much less the third or the fourth. They were a kind of thing that I sat down and thought, so what would the character do next? Or what would be an intriguing thing for this organization to be doing now? And actually what the I'm not going to, kind of spoil the ending, but what the organization ended up being was nothing like what I'd imagined when I started writing the first book.
Wow, okay. Yeah, I would imagine that over the period of time of writing those four books, like, I guess it must change so much from what you originally thought it was going to be.
Yeah, that's right. And it is a process writing. I've always written. I started off as a writer, and I'm a very fast writer. I'm a very kind of I wouldn't say I'm massively good at it, but it's something that I can do and do well. But fiction is a whole different ball game. You can I can sit down to my laptop now, and if I have to write an essay on natural history, then I can sit down, I can work for 3 or 4 hours, and I know how many words I'm going to write. If I'm doing something in fiction, if I'm feeling inspired and creative, I can sit down and write for 12 hours and it's all brilliant. And if I'm not, then I can sit there and I will write nothing, not a single word, because you're just not feeling it. And I haven't really experienced that until I started doing these books, and it's a curious place to be.
Yeah, definitely. I think with writing especially, because I've done a bit of creative writing in the past. I love it. I've loved it since, in primary school when you're tasked to write certain stories about certain topics. I've always loved creative writing. I've always loved being able to create this fictional world much more than I do writing essays and things like that. But you do have to have the motivation to do it, otherwise you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that it's well, I mean, I'd love to do more of this. I'd love to do more creativity in writing poetry and in, making, kind of making films, making television programs that are fictional. But the truth is, I just don't have the time. And like I said, you've got to be in that brain space. And if you're not, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. But leading on from that, then, I mean, what would you say motivates you?
I have always been something of a workaholic. I think I have a very strong work ethic, and I, want to get as much done as I can. I now more than ever, I guess, am aware that there is a responsibility there as well. So I've been making kids wildlife programs since 2003, so 20 years now, and I'm very aware that those programs can, if done well, make a difference. They can, put in front of young people the tools for a life spent working in conservation, spent working with animals, spent working with wildlife. So they have a value beyond the entertainment of the product itself. And that drives me on. That makes me want to think, well, how could I make this better? How could I, come up with a more exciting way of telling this story that is gonna bring more youngsters to the wild world? So I have so many different things that motivate me, and they're very, very different to how my wife motivates herself as an Olympic athlete. I find it fascinating to see how different the two of us are in the way we motivate ourselves for things.
Yeah, definitely. Like you've said, we're all different. We all have certain things that we like to do to motivate ourselves, certain things that help us relax, certain things that we can do to cope if we're stressed. And it's so cool to think about that we all have different ways of doing things, but yet we're all like, the same species.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's totally true. But I think that there's lots and lots of manuals written on how to motivate yourself and how to, get yourself doing a particular task. But the truth is you really have to find your own path. You have to find your own way of motivating yourself because it is different for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Now, if you had to pick, what would you say has been your proudest moment in your life so far?
Well, do you know what? It's not any of the awards or the letters after your name or any those kind of things. None of the obvious things. Um, it's fatherhood. It's having these three young, wonderful people that I now have the responsibility of trying to give a wonderful life to. And I think that has made me more proud than all of the other obvious accomplishments put together.
Oh, I mean, that is so sweet. And I can totally understand. I can totally understand that. So now let's sort of look forward to the future. Do you have any future goals or aspirations that you would like to achieve?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to do expeditions with the family, if that was possible, if I can find anyone who'll commission them. I am at present trying to fundraise for a feature film, which I have put together, and I'm trying to get all the money together. It's much harder than I thought it would be. There will definitely be more books, more tours, and all of the things that I am doing now, but doing it with the motivation of, having always in the back of my mind that it needs to be productive for the family.
Yeah, definitely. And I wish you all the best of luck with that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You are so amazing, so cool. The work you do is phenomenal, and I really, really appreciate you showing me all those animal calls because I'm an animal lover, always have been, always will be. Like you, I've grown up around animals, and I think it's so important to. And like I mentioned earlier, the way I engage and interact with the world is all through sound. So I really appreciate you showing me all those animal calls.
You are so, so welcome. And if you would humor me, I'd like to leave you with one final call, which is to me the most haunting, in some ways almost disturbing of all calls in nature. It is heard right here in this country, although mostly up in the north in Scotland. This is the call of the Great Northern Diver.
Wow. That is so, so cool. But like you said, you're right, it's so haunting, isn't it?
It is. And this is a sound that on a clear day will echo across a Scottish loch, carrying for miles with that strange, wavering call. Over on the other side of the pond, they're known as loons because they were believed to be the calls of far off crazy people who were kind of hollering in the distance. And to me, it is evocative of the wilderness, of the place that I treasure the most. And certainly the Highlands of Scotland and the Scottish lochs are, on a good day, there is nowhere better on earth.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that is amazing. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the podcast. I genuinely don't think I can compliment you enough. And I have to say, the way that you were able to link those animal calls into the answers you gave for my questions is very impressive. Don't know how you were able to do that, but yeah.
You're so welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you to my audience for listening. And I will see you all next time.